Welcome to Crossroads. The Chinese Communist Party has been rolling out a large-scale propaganda campaign, this one aimed at the Muslim world. Now, at the same time, right alongside this, the Communist Party has been trying to court key Muslim countries and also some of the regional powers. But interestingly, behind the scenes, the Chinese Communist Party, while it has a propaganda campaign and the charm campaign, it also maintains a brutal persecution of Muslims in China, including with re-education through labor, slave labor, torture, and even killing people for their organs. It seems right now its diplomatic push is trying to, accomplish something that may not be reasonable, but already interestingly as well, it's running into some trouble. Now, I want to start first with the charm campaign. This is what the Wall Street Journal is saying. They say in the U.S., China's far western Xinjiang region is often associated with detention camps and a vast network of security checkpoints to control Uyghurs and other mostly Muslim minorities. It notes that in China, another image of Xinjiang is dominated lately. One of a young woman running across mountainous fields like Heidi of the Alps and falling in love with a local herdsman. It notes that for years, Beijing, the CCP, has denied Western allegations of human rights violations in Xinjiang, with China portraying the region as infected by a violent strain of religious extremism that needs to be eradicated, according to the CCP, of course. Now, it says, at least for a domestic audience, China's propaganda system is promoting a far more idyllic view of the region, and so far it appears to be working. It notes that in recent weeks, a television drama, To the Wonder, about the love between a Han Chinese writer and a Kazakh man, has grabbed China's attention, dominating social media and sparking a Xinjiang tourism boom. Now look, remember, the Chinese Communist Party has tight censorship controls over shows and films. If something like this gets made, it's because the CCP is letting it get made. And if the Chinese Communist Party wants to, let's say, present a certain dissident region, Xinjiang, Tibet, and certain parts of Mongolia, even Hong Kong, well, it has to be done with strict control by the Chinese Communist Party, because the CCP regards the cultures, the traditions, and even the narratives around these areas as potential threats to its authority. Now, CCP leader Xi Jinping is also now trying to be a voice of peace for the whole Muslim world, ironically. And he's even trying to portray itself as a force really that cares about Muslims in Gaza. Now, Al Jazeera said that Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for a peace conference aimed at resolving the Israel-Palestine conflict and ending the, quote, tremendous suffering in Gaza. And it's addressing Arab leaders, the China-Arab States Cooperation Forum in Beijing on Thursday, Xi said Israel's war in Gaza should not continue indefinitely and justice should not be absent forever. Now, this new propaganda push isn't just limited to entertainment or even just to diplomacy. The Chinese Communist Party is also making a new push into, interestingly, the food industry, into halal food in this case. Now, Tridge notes that the article highlights the dynamics of the global halal market. Of course, halal is a type of food that Muslims are permitted to eat, right? The food needs to adhere to certain requirements in order to be deemed clean. And the CCP is trying to get into that. Now, this article notes that a segment of the economy that has been in existence since the inception of Islam and now represents a population of 2 billion Muslims with a market value of nearly $2.3 trillion. It notes that the emphasis on this of China's growing influence in this sector, halal food, particularly in the export of halal goods and services, with a trade value of $40.4 billion in 2021, making it the largest exporter of to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation countries. It notes that China's dominance is notably seen in the pharmaceuticals and cosmetic sectors, driven by the demand for halal-certified ingredients. The country is also expanding its reach in the halal food industry, especially in Arab countries associated with the Belt and Road Initiative, one of the CCP's big economic initiatives outside of China. Now, it notes that, however, China faces challenges in establishing the legitimacy of its halal certification, which is currently not as respected as those from countries like Malaysia and Gulf nations. And notes that in response, China is collaborating with Malaysian and Gulf certifiers to enhance the reputation of its halal products. Now look, remember, with the Chinese Communist Party, there's not a real strong divide between business and government. If the CCP has a big investment program, the Communist Party has to approve of it. They regulate everything, including individual investments, especially when it's on a large scale. Anything happening with the Belt and Road Initiative in particular is deeply tied in with CCP agendas. Nothing happens outside of it. And trade programs like this, a big shift to the halal market, would of course tie in with its Belt and Road Initiative, but especially into the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to create the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, something we should all become familiar with. This is a large-scale infrastructure network project that the CCP hopes can connect its Xinjiang, or also known as East Turkestan region, that's the Muslim region of China. They want to connect that to Pakistan's Gwadar port. But the problem with that project is the CCP is also finding itself the target of separatist and terrorist groups. Because as you get into the Balochistan region, which they have to go through, while they regard themselves as being separate from Pakistan, they don't agree with the Pakistan government, and they've become targets of those separatists there because they're seeing the CCP is being seen as collaborating with the government that is undermining their territorial rights. Now, the CCP's plan, though, is to turn this massive trade corridor into a new route, a kind of new Silk Road in a way, and to establish a route for energy imports from the Middle East as well. This would help the CCP avoid, for example, maritime trade routes like the Strait of Malacca, which would be shut down if a war were to take place, or risk being shut down. But remember, this is also pulling the Chinese Communist Party into the very complex politics of the Muslim world. There's a lot of tribal divisions, there's a lot of national divisions, there's a lot of religious divisions, especially among different denominations. And this is something difficult, as many countries have discovered, including the Soviets and the United States, and others who found themselves embroiled in the region. For the Chinese Communist Party, this is even more difficult, though, because, well, while the CCP is doing propaganda and diplomatic pushes and halal food and so on, the CCP is also probably the biggest persecutor of Muslims on the face of the planet. The Chinese Communist Party's abuses of Muslims is deemed an actual genocide. So what's the solution? How does the CCP get around this fact? Well, it seems the Chinese Communist Party is trying to play both sides. It's maintaining its abuses. It's re-education through labor, slavery, torture, genocide, arrests, surveillance, you name it. But at the same time as it does that, it's using propaganda to try to portray those things differently, trying to make it seem that the CCP benefited these Muslim regions. And then it pretends to represent itself as being the opposite of what it actually is to the Muslim world, in order to help with trade deals and regional ties and so on, while at the same time trying to keep out of the regional conflicts, which may not work, frankly, because any international trade power also needs to maintain the security of the trade routes, as all global powers have discovered, especially with maritime trade. The CCP, in other words, is getting itself into a hot mess very quickly. Now, in reality, the new propaganda campaign they're launching, in reality, this is about money and it's about regional power. Let me explain. It's also, of course, tied in with a two-phase system. The reality of the Chinese Communist Party, again, being one of the world's largest abusers of Muslims. And this fact could actually be the time bomb for the Chinese Communist Party. I'll be talking about more about this after a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party is trying to run a charm campaign against the Muslim world that ironically contradicts what it's actually doing. Now, this includes, for example, propaganda programs in China, new pushes for diplomatic programs, and so on, where the Chinese Communist Party is trying to win new support among Muslim countries. But this two-faced system is not really in line with reality, let's say. The reality of this all is that the CCP is one of the world's largest abusers of Muslims. And this fact could work as an ideological time bomb for the CCP, especially as it tries to portray itself as being the opposite of what it actually is. In its Muslim regions, the Chinese Communist Party is carrying out policies of significant, deep religious persecution, and what even amounts to what's being called cultural genocide. It is deemed a legitimate genocide. Now, Sky News notes just recently that in a cold, dusty part of central China, a local Muslim leader stands alone in the courtyard of a small mosque, and he says, quote, "The religion was living, and now it's like it's dying." And it notes that what he's describing is in part the impact of an express policy in Xi Jinping's China, one that aims to sinicize religion. In other words, take religions and really bring it under Chinese Communist Party control. Two, it says, reduce its influence and make it more Chinese. And by Chinese here, they don't mean Han Chinese, they actually mean CCP run. Now, it's that Sky News has spent months investigating the impact of the policy on the ancient Hui community of the Chinese Muslims, and notes that they had witnessed the widespread de-Islamification of buildings, the creep of Communist Party ideology into religious spaces, and gradual moves to restrict religious teachings, language, and cultural practices. It is a cultural genocide. And in addition to this, the Chinese Communist Party's persecutions are brutal. There's large-scale slave labor. In fact, a lot of the garment industry ties into this slave labor. The Chinese Communist Party takes people, tortures them, blood tests them. Oftentimes, their only violation will have been believing in religion, and then uses them as living sources for organ transplants. They do this especially to Falun Gong practitioners, but also very heavily to Chinese Muslims. And, of course, they do some house Christians as well and some other groups. But the definition of all of this, right, the definition of a crime under the Chinese Communist Party is very broad as well. If the CCP says that somebody is a terrorist, for example, which is the narrative they use against Muslims, they might not actually be terrorists. If you just simply oppose the Chinese Communist Party, if you express that you're not happy with the policies of the Chinese Communist Party, if you undermine the authority of the Chinese Communist Party, you can get slapped with that label and they can torture you, they can kill you, they can harvest your organs. The definitions, again, are extremely broad. Bitter Winter had this story. It notes that a 24-year-old man, that his brother was sentenced to 5 years and 4 months in prison. And what was his violation? It was disturbing public order by illegal gathering. It notes that one of these individuals, the one still free, lives in the United States. And that according to the Chinese court, the process of illegal gatherings is as follows. This individual's brother and a friend come to this area to look for work. Their friends from this area meet them at a restaurant, at the table. There was a conversation about a friend who had been convicted 2 years before. Somebody commented that he was a good man and was just caught up in the wind of politics. And the individual who was sentenced to 5 years in prison, what was his crime? It was to listen to those provocative words instead of standing up and leaving at once. And that was deemed, of course, an illegal meeting because they were saying the person who was arrested was a good man. And again, that was basically what happened. In China, under the Chinese Communist Party, that's the persecution of Muslim Uyghurs looks like. In other words, if you were to sit down at a table and a friend had been arrested, and you said he was a good man, I disagree with the arrest of him, he was a good man. If you merely sit there and listen to it in China, you can be sentenced to 5 years in prison, as this individual was. That is the nature, that is the extent, even worse than that, in fact, of the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of Muslim Uyghurs. It includes, again, torture, killing, slavery, and it doesn't stop there either. The United States, for example, even rolled out some sanctions recently on Chinese companies because they were using slave labor from persecuted Muslims. Reuters said this, in fact. They said the U.S. has added 3 more companies to a list that bars imports from firms allegedly involved with Uyghur forced labor in China, according to a U.S. government notice posted online on Tuesday, just recently. And it notes that, quote, through these actions, Department of Homeland Security is increasing its focus on seafood, aluminum, and shoes, sectors that play an important role in Xinjiang's economy, and ensuring goods made with forced labor, i.e. slavery, are kept out of the U.S. market. That was from a statement from the Department of Homeland Security. It notes as well that scores of companies have been added to the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act entity list, which restricts the import of goods tied to what the U.S. government has characterized as an ongoing genocide of minorities in China's western Xinjiang region, also called East Turkestan. And also, U.S. officials say Chinese authorities have established labor camps for Uyghurs and other Muslim minority groups in Xinjiang. It notes as well that Beijing denies any abuses, as you would expect. But the irony with this, the Chinese Communist Party is putting on 2 very different faces when it comes to the Muslim world. On one side, they're enslaving, torturing, and killing Muslims. On the other side, the CCP is trying to portray itself as a friend to the Muslim world with a large-scale charm offensive. And you now even have CCP leader Xi Jinping attempting to control the peace negotiations between Hamas and Israel. Now, I'll be talking more about how Xi Jinping met with the Palestinian Authority and how that's playing out. That's going to be exclusively, though, on EpochTV.com. So for those of you watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, you can click the link below and come join us on EpochTV.com, our uncensored streaming platform of the Epoch Times. Not only will you be getting access to the rest of this episode, but also many of our great shows, movies, and documentaries we have, including my documentary, The Final War, which exposes how the Chinese Communist Party has been planning to infiltrate and subvert America. The Chinese Communist Party is a mystery to most Americans, but don't be fooled, they're actually the biggest threat to our freedom. My documentary, The Final War, traces back to the beginning of the Chinese Communist Party to reveal its 100-year plot to defeat the United States. Let me show you a quick trailer for it before we jump exclusively to Epoch TV for the rest of this episode.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.